All right, we're back with another episode of the Anime Village podcast. On this episode, we're focused on breaking character. And Brian is joining us back. He's our chief lore officer at Anime Village. He's been a part of this series. He's been giving us great information on writing and like across mediums. We had a great conversation last week with about the writing scripts across mediums, and I thought that was an awesome episode. And we're just continuing down the line of storytelling. This one we're talking about breaking character. So Brian, what does breaking character mean? I mean, we just talked about that off there. I had a different preference, but you had a different preferences too, and actually what it actually is. So
Yeah, I think the traditional definition of breaking character is not to be confused with maybe a more well-known or a more popular saying, which is Breaking Bad. Now, when you say Breaking Bad, it's when you establish a character that is not necessarily evil or sinister, right?
yeah,
But they've always had that within them. And then all of a sudden it comes out in them, and that's when they break bad, right? So you had Walter White, who on the surface was this character that seemed, pretty nice, demure, kind of unassuming, nothing sinister. But the story is he always had that in him.
yeah.
So it was this extraordinary situation that brought it out of him, and then he finally breaks bad and reverts to what he truly is. Breaking character is a bit different in that you have a character that you've established, right? His or her traits, characteristics, personality, and then so they react to a situation in a certain way, and that should be consistent. When you break character, they react to a situation that isn't in line with who that established character is. That's what it's always meant to me.
Yeah, I was a little confused, but the Breaking Bad makes sense now of that and then the breaking character.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the importance of when you're writing about a character for not to break that character and have that character break character? Like how important is that to like the reader, but also to the writer as well too?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to the story, obviously, because you want that consistency with the character, no matter what the situation is, whether it's just a regular, everyday humdrum kind of an affair, or if it's some extraordinary situation or circumstance that they find them in, right? It's always, no matter what kind of scene that we're painting here, I always try and figure out, okay, here's the character, here's what they're like, this is how they would react no matter come what may, right? And then we have another character, this is how they would react. Would they be scared? Would they be, off put, or would it not phase them at all, right? You've kind of got to establish these tropes and then be consistent on how you present them, right? So in Adamanto, we have Shinichi Tanzo, who is this very seasoned warrior, right? He's been there, he's done that. But then he's faced with these enemies, the likes of which he's never seen before, right? Like all of a sudden he's facing off against titans and undead warriors and Goliaths and mechas and all these different things, right? So where he thought he'd been there, done that, he ain't seen nothing yet, right? So how, like, when I'm thinking about these scenarios in my head, how does Shinichi react to that? Well, in my mind, he's kind of like, he's surprised and he's scared, but he doesn't want to let that out, right? He wants it to seem like it's, no, I'm not phased at all. This is just, every day as usual for me. But in reality, you've got to kind of portray him as, no, this is something that is extraordinary and something that I'm not really well equipped to deal with, right? But you get that through either expressions, very, very important in manga, or you get that through maybe in more private moments if he's having a conversation with one of his trusted allies and says, you know what, that shit was crazy, like I don't know, it's like I didn't let on, but man, it's like that blew my mind.
Have you ever like seen it in a sense of like when you're in the writing aspect of it, of like someone who wrote a character but who doesn't stick to the characteristics of the character, who actually they do break the character? And have you ever seen that before or read about?
Yeah, unfortunately that happens more times than not now, especially in Western comic books.
Right.
Really what you've had is, and that's kind of sad, but at the same time it's not unexpected, because you have people that don't aren't students of those characters or those books, right? You have these characters that have been around for like 70, 80, 90 years. And during that time span, they develop a character, right? And it's like, oh, okay, this is how Thor would react, or Captain America, or Green Lantern, or any of these characters. And now you have these more contemporary interpretations of these characters, and you've got readers like pulling their hair out. And it's like, you know what? No way. There's no way Captain America would do that, or there's no way Spider-Man would react to a situation like this, right? And these are based obviously on all of these years that they've spent with these characters, where it's like they've come to expect certain things from them. And when you subvert that, that's, I mean, it can be good when done properly, but you have to do it in a certain way. But if it's just done through some misunderstanding or unfamiliarity with that character, that's what pisses readers off.
Yeah. I mean, it's understandable. We would definitely witness that. I kind of knew you were gonna go that route with like the Marvel, because I could see even in the movies you start with like Thor, how like he was like serious, really serious, and then all of a sudden they just made him like it was a comedy, like as like movies started becoming like comedy films, and you're like, this is
Yeah.
very interesting.
Thor is actually a really good example of that. So you had, I mean, the first Thor wasn't a great movie. It was an okay jumping off point. And then you had the second one was Thor the Dark World.
Yeah.
Was I mean, I'm probably not, I know I'm not alone in saying that, describing it as such. Then you had Thor Ragnarok, which was a happy accident. I think when I can never pronounce his name, Taiki Waititi,
Oh yeah, it's like Kitty Wood.
he took
Yeah.
over behind the camera, and he also scripted it, I believe.
Yep.
And it was more or less a comedy. And it worked for some reason. I don't know to this. I mean, I watched that movie and it's like, yeah, I enjoy myself, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because it was just like a break, just, a stylistic change. And that was kind of like a novelty. And then you go to Love and Thunder, and it's like he even took it to the next level insofar as the comedic elements were concerned, and the kind of cheesy, very lighthearted interactions with the gods and all the characters. And it's like, no, this ain't
No.
working. This
Yeah.
is not Thor, right? He looks like Thor, he kind of talks like Thor, but that ain't Thor. So that's where you kind of lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I liked Ragnarok, and then that Love and Thunder was just very like it was too much. It was just like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
get back to the regular scheduled program here. But when you're writing to like, how do you keep a character consistent in a sense of the make the choices they make and not to break character? I think from any aspect, I know you said that like think about it, but like how do you keep it going? Like, do you have to take a step back and be like, no, like Shinichi wouldn't do that. Like, if you were writing something like, no, that doesn't make sense. Of like, he wouldn't do that. Like, like how would you keep that going and like make sure you stick to the lines of what the character should be like?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's in manga, it's established two major ways, and one of them has nothing to do with the writer.
Yeah,
So the first one is dialogue, right?
yeah,
You create a speech pattern, a way of for that character to speak, and then you're consistent with that, right? That right away can distinguish one character from another, and it also gives you that consistency with how they speak, how they talk to a situation, how they talk to others. The second is the artist, right? The expressions, the looks that they
yeah.
give the character, right? Is it surprise? Is it like more laid back? Is it, whatever that expression might be? The artist plays a huge role in establishing the consistency of the character. And whether whatever the situation might be. And that's why it's so important that you get an artist that understands that when you're looking through style sheets, and when you're talking about the character, and when you're creating these characters, you have to get on the same page regarding, okay, this is what they are, this is how they move forward. And then when you combine that with the consistent dialogue, then you have a character that sticks.
It's very interesting in the sense of like working with the artists and how they get the expressions out. Like, how do you work with a specific artist, or like how does that back and forth go? Like saying like, I want Shinichi, he's like a seasoned vet. Like, how can you make him like this for me? Or like Lord Kami, like how can you make him like a powerful dude? Like how do you get on the same page of what you guys are looking for when you're trying to create your characters?
Sure. Well, it really does depend on the experience of the artist, and then also what kind of scripts they like working with. Like, I've seen writers' scripts where it's pretty much bare bones. They used to have something called the Marvel method, where it wasn't even a complete script. It didn't even sometimes have dialogue, and it was just very bare bones. It described something that's happening in a scene. Spider-Man swings into downtown Manhattan, and then the artist was left to the rest of it, right? Like when you're talking about a guy like John Romita Sr., who's definitely he recently passed away, but man, he was just unbelievable. They would take these bare bones scripts and create the emotion and create, even though Spider-Man was wearing a mask, right?
Yeah.
He somehow was able to convey emotions, like with the eyes and with the tilt of the head and things like that. But really, it's the way I like scripting is a lot more detailed. I will include, like his eyes are wide, his mouth is gaping open, right? Or whatever, he's smiling, he's chuckling, or these kind of little touches. But sometimes, you leave it up to the artist's interpretation, and that's, we're working with an artist named Oscar Jimenez for the rest of the Adamanto title, and Oscar is a salty dog, man. Like he is a pro. That's the best way I can put it, the simplest way I can put it. Like, he has been drawing books since the mid 90s, and man, oh man, one of his strengths is expressions. Like, he puts life into these characters, man. It is just going to, like, read it. Like, when we launch the rest of the volume 1 for Adamanto, it's going to be absolutely wild. Like, his stuff is on point. He's going to make my life a lot easier, even though the script, like I said, is quite detailed.
I'm super excited to see that. Yeah, we talked about Oscar off air before and how great he is, and very excited to see that all the new chapters come out and see all the detail that comes in
Yeah.
with that. As an author, is there a decision to ever like go the opposite way and actually break character and have the character break? Like, is there a way, do you think that would be a good way? I know we touched upon Thor, but like, do you think there would be a different way, like for you to maybe think about that and write for a character to be like, okay, maybe it is a decision to kind of make this character like for like one chapter or just something different, or a couple pages or two where he is joking around, like Shinichi, just kind of like, I know maybe not so much, but like just kind of thinking like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever made a decision to break character, just because it doesn't make sense to me from a narrative standpoint. It just too many things fall by the wayside. And you've spent so much time, and you've put such an effort into making things consistent and believable in an unbelievable situation, that you don't want to stray from that. The one thing I will say is, going back to the Breaking Bad analogy, I think that makes sense, but it is a transition, right? So, using Walter White as an example again, where you had this character, he's like he was a biology teacher or a chemistry teacher.
Yeah.
It was a very boring life, right? He's got a wife, he's got a kid, another one on the way. He drives a very plain Jane car, he leads a very plain Jane life, and everything is status quo. But then he gets sick, and then he doesn't have the money to pay for the treatment. So then he's got to find a way to pay. So how does he do that? He does it by, crystal meth, right? He's
Yeah.
brewing his own crystal meth. So I argue that he was always that character. It just wasn't, you didn't see it because there wasn't that catalyst, right?
Right.
To use chemistry terminology again, to bring that out. So I love that as a story mechanism, right? Where you have a character that seems like something, but that's not the real character, and then you bring it out of him. And we do have characters that follow that line. We have Hina and Hinata, who are twin sisters. They're Kunoichi ninjas, and they're always kind of like, they're very what's the right word to explain them, they're prickly pears, right? They're always like trying to prove themselves, and they can't understand why Shinichi gets all the attention, and they think they're much better warriors than he is and much more capable, and they're younger than him, they're faster than him, so they want to ascend to that point, right? But when they find, what we find out about them is that they're actually, sweethearts, right? This is all, again, just something that they put out there, but they're really scared because of these situations that they're faced with, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of break good. They start off as bad, but then they break good. So that's one of the characters as well. And some of the other ones, I mean, the arcs that you put them through, it might seem like they're breaking character, but it's not. It's because they're dealing with extraordinary situations, right? I mean, look, if you were to walk down the street and turn the corner and all of a sudden come face to face with a 350-foot Titan, what would your reaction be? I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
mine, right? Like, obviously you'd probably be shit scared, but
Yeah.
you just look up and just, wonder, or I don't know, like, what would that reaction be? So all of that comes into play. Even in these fantastical situations, you got to come up with some sort of believable reaction to those elements.
Right, right. Yeah, it's awesome the way I think your approach of, and I've always described it like it's awesome the way that you write, and I think you put it in real life situations, and I think that's like the biggest eye opener too of what would an actual reaction be, or like put yourself in this character's shoes of how they would react, and like how you want your character to react, and like the bus stop thing has always stuck with me. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah,
most
yeah.
of everything. So I
The
think
old bus stop.
it's really cool how you are able to keep the consistency of the character and not to have them break character as well too, which is always interesting to for me. I learning this now as we do this podcast, the learning of the breaking character is very interesting too, because I never really thought of it as that way. I always thought of Breaking Bad as as like the breaking character. It's like, well, yeah, he's good, but like, have you ever thought of him going bad? But having this conversation with you now is this breaking character is very interesting, and it now when we talk about it, it brings realization of like, oh shoot, like Thor was one of them, or like something like just kind of like changes the role of the character. So it's an interesting aspect of writing for sure. I don't think that terminology really ever came up in my head before.
Yeah, and people have different interpretations of what that is, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes, I although I can't imagine a writer would say, yeah, breaking character is bad,
yeah,
or sorry, breaking character is good.
yeah, right,
Don't see
right.
how that would ever be a good situation, unless, I mean, look, we're dealing with comic books and manga, so there's always kind of like, the character is taken over by an alien being, or is being manipulated by something, or something has happened to change that character, right? It happens in these kind of stories all the time. But barring that, it's really you've got to have that character remain consistent in the way they react and act in all manner of situations.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, and it's also kudos to how you the author to keep those characters acting the same and not have anything change. I think a lot of I know for me, for if I were in that situation, I think I would kind of get a little lost in translation in some areas and be like, oh,
Hey, man, don't misunderstand. I get lost all the time. It's like, now that we're going through the first volume, so first volume is 12 chapters at 264 complete pages. We're actually going through those pages now. I'm breaking it down for the RPG that we're developing, Adamanto Bodo, which is the game for the manga. And one, I'm always amazed. Like, I think there's over 75 recurring characters that appears in there, and that's not including the ones that just have like one appearance or a couple appearances, and then all the soldiers and all the monsters and all the creatures and all the artifacts and all that stuff. So trying to keep that straight in your head is sometimes, I've gone through the script so many times, and I still catch things where it's like, oh shit, hold on a second, that's not his dialogue, that's her dialogue. And then you got to make sure that everything lines up, right?
yeah,
So making sure, and even sometimes I'll read through it now, like when it's final, I try and set it aside because I do too much tinkering, right? I'll just look at, no, I'm going to change this and make it better, even though I can't make it better because I've got it to that place, right? But it's you can still catch yourself in some situations where it's like, I'll see it and say, well, would he say it like that, or would he react like that? And sometimes you question yourself, but you got to let it go sometimes as well, saying, you know what, it's not a big deal. You wouldn't know anyway. There's no definitive answer when it comes to this, right? It's not math where 1 + 1 = 2. It's a lot more subjective to that, or objective than that.
right, right. Well, Brian, this has been awesome. Speaking with you today about breaking character, but also this podcast series has been fantastic so far. I've been loving every minute of it. I feel like, I mean, if you have been watching, keeping up with us, or you're just starting to watch it, I highly suggest you go back to the ones that we did, because it's fantastic. Because I've learned a lot about writing and character development, and everything that we talked about, scripts around mediums and everything that you have spoken upon, and like talking about Adamanto too, it just gets you more excited for Adamanto, more things coming out there, but also for the writing aspect too. It's really cool for, young authors or people trying to get into writing to really learn from someone who knows what they're doing and like giving advice out there. So it's great. So I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun and awesome.
No, it's been a blast, and I look forward to doing more.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Brian, have a great one.
Thank you.